Something strange is happening in the skies above us, and for once it's not just the usual dance of stars, planets and meteors we've come to expect. In 2025, astronomers around the world will be staring upward, not at one comet streaking across the night sky, but at a swarm, 7 of them, all arriving within days of one another, as though they had been summoned for some cosmic appointment. And if that wasn't already unusual enough, hidden among this swarm is an interstellar visitor, a stranger from beyond our solar system, a traveller so rare that humanity has only recorded 2 like it in all of history. What are the odds that 7 homegrown comets and 1 interstellar object would converge at nearly the same time? Scientists call it an anomaly. Others whisper that it feels more like a warning. Normally, a year might pass with a single comet gracing the skies, sometimes none at all. But 2025 isn't normal. It's shaping up to be a year that astronomers are calling unprecedented, a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle that challenges what we thought we knew about space. Some experts suggest it's all coincidence, a random clustering of celestial bodies on intersecting paths. But others look at the timing, the precision, and the sheer improbability of it all and wonder if something bigger is at play, an unseen force, a hidden rhythm of the cosmos, or maybe a chapter in Earth's story we've never witnessed before. And here's where the mystery deepens. This convergence doesn't just mean pretty streaks of light across the sky. The timing coincides with the solar maximum, the peak of the sun's cycle, and solar flares and magnetic storms grow violent, unpredictable, and powerful enough to disrupt satellites, power grids, and even the very technology that sustains modern life. So now the question becomes not just why this convergence is happening, but what it could mean for us here on Earth. Could this be nothing more than a natural spectacle, a coincidence of orbits and timing? Or is it the beginning of something far stranger, a message written across the heavens that we haven't yet learned to read? When astronomers first began to realize what 2025 was bringing, the initial reaction wasn't excitement, it was disbelief. The numbers didn't add up, the charts looked suspicious, and the coincidences stacked higher than anyone could comfortably explain. In most years, the appearance of a single naked-eye comet would be enough to capture global headlines, sparking late-night sky-watching parties and a flurry of photos across the internet. But when data from multiple observatories began confirming not 1, not 2, but 7 comets, all heading toward perihelion, their closest approach to the Sun, within days of one another, the astronomical community was stunned. It was the kind of discovery that felt like fiction, something ripped from an ancient prophecy rather than a scientific journal. Think about how unlikely that is. In a typical decade, we might see a handful of comets bright enough to stir excitement. Sometimes a decade passes with only one truly remarkable visitor like Hale-Bopp or Neowise. But here, in a single year, a cluster of 7 is preparing to cross the stage almost simultaneously. Each of these icy wanderers has its own unique path, its own history of orbiting in the farthest, coldest reaches of the solar system. Yet somehow, their journeys align in a way that brings them all into view together, like actors converging on a stage for a performance no one rehearsed. Astronomers couldn't help but ask, is this random chance, or is there a hidden rhythm to the universe that we've overlooked? The discovery itself unfolded piece by piece. At first, it was just C2025A3, a comet catalogued and expected to pass near enough to create a spectacle in the sky. That alone would have been newsworthy. But as weeks went on, new observations trickled in. Another comet was on its way, then another still. By the time the list grew to 7, even seasoned astronomers, hardened skeptics who had spent their lives studying celestial mechanics, admitted the lineup was something extraordinary. The timing wasn't just unusual, it was statistically staggering. If comets are like rare guests at a party, this was the equivalent of them all showing up on the same night, uninvited yet perfectly synchronized. What really grabbed attention, though, wasn't just the quantity, it was the variety. These comets weren't all cut from the same cloth. Some had long elliptical orbits, returning every thousands of years. Others were more recent discoveries, faint smudges on a telescope screen that suddenly grew brighter as they neared the Sun. There was diversity in size, trajectory, and brightness, and yet they were all converging into this narrow window of cosmic time. Scientists scrambled to calculate probabilities, and the numbers only deepened the mystery. The odds of such an alignment happening purely by chance were astronomically small. Pun intended. At first, some thought it might be an observational bias, a trick of better telescopes and more advanced sky surveys. After all, we're scanning the skies more thoroughly than ever before, with instruments like Pan-STARRS in Hawaii and powerful space-based observatories picking up faint comets that past generations would have missed. Could this swarm simply be the result of our new ability to see more? That was a tempting explanation, but it fell apart under scrutiny. Even with modern equipment, the clustering was too tight, too neat, too synchronized to chalk up entirely to improved detection. It wasn't just that we were seeing more comets, it was that more comets really were arriving, and all at once. This led to speculation about hidden influences. Some wondered whether the gravitational pull of a massive unseen object, perhaps a distant planet lurking at the edge of our solar system, could be herding comets inward. Theories of Planet 9, a mysterious world far beyond Neptune, have circulated for years, and this cometary convergence seemed to fuel those whispers again. If such a planet exists, its immense gravity could disrupt the distant Oort cloud, sending a shower of icy bodies hurtling toward the inner solar system. Could 2025's swarm be the result of such a disturbance? Or was it coincidence stacked upon coincidence, a reminder that even in a universe governed by mathematics, randomness still has room to play tricks? Adding to the tension was the fact that these comets weren't just routine visitors. They were unpredictable. Comets are notorious for surprises. They can brighten dramatically as they near the sun, shedding gas and dust in dazzling displays, or they can fizzle out, disappointing those who expected fireworks. Some fragment, breaking apart into smaller comets or dissolving entirely. Others suddenly flare with bursts of activity, hinting at volatile materials within. With 7 of them inbound, the potential for spectacle, or catastrophe, was multiplied. Astronomers and skywatchers alike began to wonder, would 2025 be a year of 7 disappointments, 7 wonders, or something in between? Then came the interstellar twist. While the 7 comets were already enough to shock the community, data confirmed something even stranger. Among them was not a native of our solar system at all, but an interstellar object, a visitor from beyond, named 3IATLAS. It would be only the 3rd interstellar object ever observed passing through our neighborhood, after Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019. The timing was uncanny. Interstellar visitors are extraordinarily rare, and yet here was one, arriving at precisely the same time as this unprecedented swarm of comets. For many, this tipped the event from coincidence into mystery. What invisible hand, if any, was orchestrating this alignment? But before conspiracy theories could spiral too far, the scientific community pushed back, emphasizing the need for careful observation. Natural explanations, however improbable they seemed, had to be exhausted before leaping to extraordinary conclusions. Comets, after all, are remnants of the early solar system, debris left over from the formation of planets. Their orbits, while long and complex, still obey gravity's rules. And yet, the sheer spectacle of 7 of them arriving together couldn't be ignored. Even the most cautious scientists admitted this was an anomaly worth paying attention to. For the public, though, the discovery lit a fire of fascination and fear. Headlines painted the sky as a stage for a once-in-history event. Social media buzzed with speculation, from doomsday predictions to wild theories about alien intervention. Ancient prophecies were dusted off and quoted, with some pointing to comets as omens of change or catastrophe. After all, history is filled with moments when comets were seen as harbingers, signs of dynasties falling, wars beginning, or disasters looming. Now, in the hyper-connected age, those same fears spread faster and louder than ever before. But beneath the noise and speculation, one truth stood out. The discovery of this swarm was real. The dates, the orbits, the convergence. It was happening, and no one could deny it. Scientists prepared their instruments, observatories scheduled nights for round-the-clock monitoring, and ordinary people looked up at the sky with a mix of awe and unease. The strange discovery had transformed 2025 from an ordinary year into a cosmic event, one that would test not only our science but our imagination. And yet, as remarkable as the discovery itself was, it was only the beginning. because while finding 7 comets and an interstellar visitor all arriving at once was shocking, the deeper question remained unanswered. What would happen when they got here? What secrets would they reveal? And more importantly, what consequences might their arrival carry for us on Earth? The strange discovery had set the stage, but the story was only starting to unfold. The real weight of the mystery in 2025 came not from the mere announcement that 7 comets were inbound, but from the details of who they were and how their stories intertwined. Each one carried its own strange identity, a mix of cold mathematics and fiery unpredictability, and together they formed what some astronomers began calling the Celestial Choir. Lining them up side by side was like reading a cast list for a play you couldn't believe was real. Some were ancient veterans, others were fresh discoveries, and one was a complete outsider, an interstellar nomad that didn't belong to this solar family at all. And yet, by some twist of timing, they were all preparing to step into Earth's skies almost at once. The first of these visitors, and the one that initially tipped everyone off, was C2025 A3, 3IATLAS. Discovered early in the year by a combination of Chinese and Hawaiian observatories, it was projected to be the brightest of the swarm, potentially visible even in broad daylight at its peak. Already images showed its coma growing in size, its icy nucleus throwing off gases as it began to warm under the sun's approach. Astronomers speculated that if its structure held together, it could rival the great comets of history, the kind that dominate folklore for centuries. But therein lay the uncertainty. Comets are fragile things, prone to fragmenting under solar heat, and no one knew whether A3 would emerge as a legend or collapse into dust before its moment in the spotlight. Next came Comet Nishimura, a smaller but still significant traveller that had brushed headlines before, now looping back into relevance. Its orbit traced a delicate curve that placed it closer to Venus than Earth, but its brightness suggested it might still offer stunning views. What struck astronomers was the timing. If Nishimura's return had been isolated, it would have been heralded as the comet of the year. Yet in 2025 it was simply one voice among 7, its solitary grandeur drowned in the chorus. This paradox fascinated skywatchers. Individually, each comet was impressive. Together they created something almost beyond comprehension. The third entry in the lineup was Comet Pons-Brooks, often nicknamed the Devil Comet for its dramatic and unpredictable outbursts. This wasn't its first appearance. It has a known orbit of 71 years, and every return brings surprises. In the months leading up to its 2025 approach, it had already stunned astronomers with sudden flares of brightness, almost like fireworks exploding from within. These bursts are caused by volatile materials beneath its surface suddenly venting, sending plumes of gas and dust spraying into space. The comet's reputation for wild behaviour gave it a dramatic role in the ensemble, unpredictable, flashy, and perfectly suited to add tension to the year's unfolding celestial drama. Would it erupt again at the crucial moment, dazzling humanity with a display unlike anything seen before? Or would its fireworks fizzle, overshadowed by the others? Then there was Comet 46P Virtanen, a more modest figure but a familiar one. Known as a short-period comet, it orbits the Sun every 5.5 years, making it a frequent visitor. Usually its appearances are pleasant but not spectacular, a kind of reliable but unsensational showpiece for amateur astronomers. Yet even this regular guest added weight to the lineup. It was as though the cosmos had invited not only rare strangers from the depths of space, but also an old friend, ensuring that no voice was left out of this bizarre symphony. Even routine players can seem extraordinary when they arrive in the middle of an unprecedented convergence. The fifth on the list turned heads, because it was only recently discovered, C2025 F1, detected by deep sky surveys and quickly confirmed as a long-period comet, with origins in the distant Oort cloud. This one, in particular, carried with it the weight of mystery. Long-period comets are essentially newcomers to human history, making appearances that recur only every tens of thousands or even millions of years. To think that one had chosen this exact year, this exact window of time, to show itself was unsettling to some and exhilarating to others. It reminded people that the universe is vast, unpredictable, and capable of timing that seems almost intentional. The sixth comet added a new layer of tension. Comet C2024 Vistou, discovered only months earlier, appeared smaller and less dramatic than A3 or Ponsbrook's. But what made it significant was its orbit. It would pass unusually close to Earth, though still at a safe distance by astronomical standards. That closeness raised eyebrows, especially among the public. Even when astronomers assured that there was no threat of collision, the mere fact of a near pass was enough to stir online speculation. Social media quickly filled with ominous predictions, memes, and doomsday chatter. After all, it's one thing to hear about distant comets streaking across the void, it's another to imagine one brushing right past your home planet. And finally, the crown jewel of mystery, 3IATLAS, the interstellar interloper. Unlike its companions, this comet wasn't born from our sun's icy leftovers. It came from somewhere else entirely. Perhaps another star system, perhaps the dark void between. Only 2 such interstellar visitors had ever been recorded before, and both had left astronomers with more questions than answers. The cigar-shaped Oumuamua in 2017 sparked debate about whether it was a natural rock or an alien probe. Borisov in 2019 resembled a more traditional comet, though still undeniably foreign. Now, in 2025, Atlas arrived in the middle of a lineup already bursting with improbability. It was like a stranger walking into a family reunion, its presence a reminder that the universe extends far beyond our small neighbourhood. The fact that its arrival coincided with the swarm made the entire event feel almost orchestrated. Taken together, this lineup was unlike anything in recorded history. Never before had humanity seen so many comets of such variety, brightness, and timing converge in the same narrow period. In fact, the statistical odds of this happening were so low that astronomers struggled to convey them to the public in any meaningful way. One researcher described it as the equivalent of shuffling a deck of cards and dealing a perfect royal flush 7 times in a row. Others compared it to lightning striking the same spot over and over again, not just once or twice, but dozens of times. And yet, here it was, unfolding in real time. The implications stretched beyond science into culture. Religious groups began attaching symbolic meaning to the lineup, some proclaiming it as a sign of divine intervention or impending change. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was evidence of hidden forces at play, perhaps even extraterrestrial. Meanwhile, ordinary people simply looked up in awe, marvelling at the beauty of the skies and feeling, if only briefly, that they were part of something greater. But perhaps the most intriguing part of the lineup was the way each comet seemed to complement the others. A3 brought the promise of brilliance. Nishimura added subtlety. Ponsbrook's delivered unpredictability. Virtanen grounded the event in familiarity. F1 brought mystery. V2 sparked anxiety with its closeness, and Atlas shattered boundaries by being interstellar. It was as if the universe had curated the cast itself, ensuring that every possible emotional note, wonder, fear, curiosity, nostalgia, excitement, was played in harmony. As the dates of closest approach drew nearer, the lineup began to dominate headlines. Newspapers ran dramatic infographics comparing their paths. Television specials promised the year of the 7 comets. Schools prepared telescopes for students, while tourism companies marketed comet-chasing trips. Even those with little interest in astronomy found themselves caught up in the anticipation, because deep down, everyone understood that this was not just another celestial event, it was history in motion, the kind of story our descendants might one day look back on with awe. But as dazzling as the lineup appeared on paper, one truth remained. Comets are unpredictable. Each one had the potential to surprise or disappoint, to erupt in brilliance or vanish into nothingness. And with 7 of them arriving in such tight succession, the chance of chaos increased exponentially. Would they complement one another in the sky, creating a show for the ages? Or would the cosmic choir descend into discord, collapsing under its own improbable weight? What no one could deny was that the lineup itself was real, and its timing impossible to ignore. And as the world held its breath, waiting for the first arrivals, one thought lingered in everyone's mind. This wasn't just a coincidence. It felt like the universe had something to say. If there was one question that kept surfacing over and over again as the news of the 7 comets spread, it was this: what are the chances? People from every walk of life, scientists, journalists, casual sky watchers, Even schoolchildren wanted to know how likely it was that something like this could occur. On the surface, it seemed impossible. Comets are rare visitors, and spectacular comets even rarer. For 7 of them to appear almost simultaneously within a short human time span seemed to defy the very laws of probability. The more experts tried to put numbers to it, the more the story grew into a riddle that pushed the boundaries of our understanding of statistics, randomness, and maybe even destiny itself. To understand the scale of the improbability, you first have to look at how often comets of this magnitude appear. On average, a bright comet, one visible without a telescope, graces Earth's skies about once every 5 to 10 years. Some decades are richer than others, of course. There have been long dry spells where nothing of note appeared, and then sudden bursts of activity where 2 or 3 comets brighten the skies in close succession. But 7? That number didn't even fit into the models. It was an outlier so extreme that most textbooks hadn't even considered it as a scenario worth mentioning. Astronomers attempted to break it down mathematically for the public. Imagine rolling a pair of dice. Getting a double 6, the rarest outcome, is a 1 in 36 chance. Now imagine rolling that same double 6 not just once but 7 times in a row. That level of improbability was in the ballpark of what it meant for these comets to align in such a short window of time. But even that analogy fell short, because comets aren't dice. They aren't independent, neatly controlled objects subject to clean mathematical rules. They are chaotic, fragile, and driven by countless forces: gravitational tugs from planets, the faint push of sunlight, the outgassing of their own frozen cores. To have 7 large, visible comets all making appearances within months of each other wasn't just unlikely, it was almost unfathomable, and yet the human mind struggles with big numbers. When people heard scientists say the odds were 1 in billions or even trillions, it didn't always sink in. Numbers that large lose meaning. They become abstract. So experts turned to analogies. One compared it to shuffling a deck of cards and pulling out the ace of spades 7 times in a row. Another described it as a lottery where Earth had somehow bought 1 ticket and won 7 jackpots in the same year. Others framed it in terms of cosmic time. The universe has been around for billions of years, and in all that time an event like this has likely never happened. And yet here it was unfolding in our lifetimes. These comparisons helped, but they also raised unsettling questions. If the odds are that slim, how do we explain it? Is it just luck? Or is there something more behind the timing? This question didn't just live in the realm of science, it bled into philosophy, religion, and conspiracy. Some people argued that the probability problem proved the universe was trying to tell us something, that fate or destiny had aligned these 7 celestial messengers at this precise moment for a reason. Others suggested the opposite, that the universe doesn't care, that coincidences happen, and we just notice them more when they're dramatic. Psychologists pointed out that human beings are hardwired to seek patterns. We crave meaning in randomness, and when something feels too coincidental, our instinct is to assume it must be orchestrated. But even within the scientific community, there were debates. Some astronomers tried to explain the lineup by looking at underlying causes. Could there have been a disturbance in the Oort cloud, a vast shell of icy bodies at the edge of the solar system, sending a wave of comets inward at once? Perhaps a passing star or unseen gravitational influence had nudged them, creating a chain reaction that we were only now witnessing. If true, then maybe the event wasn't as improbable as it looked. It could have been the natural result of a single cosmic trigger. Yet even this explanation had holes. The comets weren't all from the same region of space, nor did their orbits align neatly. Some were long period, some were short period, and one wasn't even from our solar system at all. The diversity of their origins suggested randomness rather than a single cause, which only deepened the puzzle. In public discussions, the probability question became a magnet for speculation. Conspiracy forums claimed the event was being downplayed, that governments knew the odds were too strange to be natural and were hiding the truth. Was it evidence of extraterrestrial involvement? Was someone or something trying to send a message? Others went further, weaving apocalyptic narratives. To them, the statistical impossibility of 7 comets arriving at once wasn't just coincidence, it was prophecy. They linked it to ancient myths, religious texts, and astrological predictions, seeing in the numbers a signal that the world was about to change forever. Mainstream scientists pushed back against these claims, but even they had to admit the lineup was exceptional. One astrophysicist described it as a once-in-civilization event, the kind of alignment you wouldn't expect to see twice in human history. Another admitted that while the statistics looked absurd, improbable events do happen. After all, someone wins the lottery. No matter how bad the odds, the fact that something is unlikely doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means that when it happens, it feels like a miracle. Yet the more people thought about it, the more unsettling the question became. If this event was so improbable, why did it happen now? In an age when billions of people could share it instantly through phones, cameras, and social media? Would the 7 comets have mattered as much if they had appeared 500 years ago, when only a handful of observers could record them? Or was the timing part of the improbability itself, that they arrived not just in our skies, but in our connected world, where their presence could ripple instantly across the globe? This layered the probability problem with a sense of eerie intentionality, as if the cosmos wanted to be witnessed. Of course, there were those who dismissed all of this as overthinking. They pointed out that improbable things happen all the time when you zoom out far enough. In a universe of infinite possibilities, even the rarest events will eventually occur. The problem, they argued, was not that the lineup was impossible, but that humans were too quick to assign it cosmic significance. We want to believe we are special, that the universe is speaking directly to us, when in reality we might just be the lucky audience for a random but breathtaking performance. Still, no matter how it was explained, the probability problem refused to go away. It became part of the story, a shadow lingering over every news headline, every photograph of the comets streaking through the night. People couldn't shake the feeling that they were living through a statistical impossibility, a moment that by all rights shouldn't exist. And whether they saw that as proof of divine design, alien engineering, or just the strange beauty of randomness, it bound humanity together in a shared sense of wonder. Because in the end, probability isn't just about numbers, it's about perception, about how we process the unlikeliness of our own existence. After all, each of us is the product of a million improbable events, ancestors meeting by chance, survival through wars and plagues, DNA recombining in just the right way to create us. Maybe the 7 comets weren't so different. Maybe their improbable convergence was simply the universe's way of reminding us that we too are improbable, and that sometimes the impossible happens not because it must, but because it can. When the world first learned that 7 comets would be streaking across the skies in 2025, one of the immediate responses beyond the shock of its improbability was to look backward. Humanity has always sought meaning in the heavens, and comets in particular have been seen as more than just frozen rocks. They've been omens, harbingers, messengers of doom, or signs of divine favour. Every era of history carries its own comet stories, and every culture has etched their appearances into memory. To place this modern convergence into context, historians, astronomers, and ordinary people alike began dusting off the old records, comparing what was happening now to what had happened before. And what they found only deepened the sense of awe and unease. Take, for instance, the Great Comet of 1066, which blazed across European skies just before the Battle of Hastings. Chroniclers of the time wrote about it in dramatic terms, calling it a fiery dragon in the heavens. To the Anglo-Saxons it was a bad omen, a sign that their kingdom was in peril. And sure enough, within months, William the Conqueror invaded, forever altering the course of English history. The comet itself, now known to be Halley's, was just following its predictable orbit, but to the people who lived under its glow, seemed to speak directly to their fate. The question that echoed in 2025 was obvious. If a single comet could be woven so tightly into the story of a nation, what would it mean for 7 to appear at once? Further back still, Chinese astronomers had been meticulously recording comets for millennia. Their dynastic chronicles are filled with references to broom stars sweeping across the sky, each linked to political upheaval, the rise and fall of emperors, or natural disasters. For ancient China, the heavens and earth were intimately connected, bound by the principle of the mandate of heaven. A comet's sudden arrival was never just a celestial event. It was a reflection of earthly imbalance, a cosmic warning that rulers had lost their virtue. To modern scholars, these records are invaluable for reconstructing the historical paths of comets. But in the minds of those who saw them centuries ago, comets were not random, they were divine signals. If 7 comets had appeared in a single year during those dynasties, it might have been interpreted as a catastrophic verdict on the emperor himself. Even the Bible contains echoes of cometary symbolism, though often described in poetic terms like falling stars or fiery signs. In medieval Europe, chroniclers linked comets to the Black Death, writing that strange lights in the sky heralded the arrival of plague. Whether or not those lights were truly comets is still debated, but the psychological association was powerful. Comets became synonymous with catastrophe. That reputation persisted into the Renaissance, when great minds like Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler began trying to untangle superstition from science. Tycho, observing the comet of 1577, proved it was no atmospheric phenomenon, but a celestial body moving through space. Kepler, meanwhile, speculated that comets might be heavenly emissaries passing through the solar system to cleanse or transform it. Even as science advanced, the aura of mystery never disappeared. The most famous of all, Halley's Comet, offers another set of parallels. It has returned again and again through human history, threading itself into countless eras. In 1910, when it came close to Earth, newspapers fueled panic by reporting that Earth would pass through its tail, which supposedly contained toxic cyanogen gas. Some people bought comet pills or special umbrellas to protect themselves from poison falling from the sky. The fact that Halley's appears on such a regular schedule makes it less dramatic today, but in the past its reappearances were stitched into historical timelines, like punctuation marks in the story of civilization. And each time it came, people projected their fears, hopes, and interpretations onto it. What makes the events of 2025 so striking is that never before has the world seen so many comets at once. Even the most comet-rich eras of history pale by comparison. In 1910, people were captivated by Halley's Comet, but that was just one. In 1577, Tycho's comet dominated European skies, but again it stood alone. To find 2 bright comets in a single year was rare enough. To find 7 was unheard of. And so, when historians and storytellers began looking for parallels, they found none exact, only echoes. The uniqueness of the lineup forced people to consider that perhaps it wasn't meant to be compared at all, but rather to stand alone as a once-in-history spectacle. Still, the impulse to draw lessons from the past was irresistible. For instance, some pointed to the Great Comet of 1811, which hung in the skies for over a year and became linked in people's minds with everything from the Napoleonic Wars to uprisings in the Americas. That comet was so bright and long-lasting that it became almost a character in history itself, woven into literature, art, and folklore. Charles Dickens even referenced it in Bleak House. The association between comets and upheaval was so strong that when 1812 brought both Napoleon's failed invasion of Russia and a series of devastating earthquakes in the United States, people blamed the comet. In 2025, the question was whispered again. If one comet could symbolize so much, what would 7 symbolize? Historians also revisited the medieval accounts of the comet of 1264, which Pope Urban IV supposedly saw as a portent of his own death. Legend has it that he died shortly after its appearance. The intertwining of personal fate with cosmic events reflects how deeply humans have always internalized the presence of comets. In modern times, when leaders saw the 7-comet lineup, some avoided commenting at all, wary of reviving old superstitions. But in private, the thought surely crossed their minds. What does it mean for world leaders, nations, and societies when the skies look like this? Perhaps the most haunting parallel came from the 20th century. In 1997, Comet Hale-Bopp lit up the skies, one of the brightest of the century. It inspired awe, but it also sparked tragedy when the Heaven's Gate cult interpreted it as a cosmic signal and carried out a mass death ritual. That event left an indelible mark, showing how celestial wonders can interact with human psychology in dangerous ways. In 2025, when 7 comets arrived at once, authorities worried about a repeat. Would groups latch onto the spectacle as proof of apocalypse, leading to dangerous outcomes? The precedent was there, reminding us that while comets themselves are harmless, human interpretation can be anything but. Even outside superstition, parallels existed in how comets inspire unity. In 1996, Comet Hyakutake brought millions of people together under the night sky, inspiring wonder across continents. Hale-Bopp did the same the following year. Those moments of shared awe were fleeting but profound, dissolving boundaries between nations as people collectively looked upward. In 2025, the 7 comets carried the potential for that same unity, magnified many times over. Unlike ancient times when only small communities saw and recorded comets, this lineup would be experienced by billions simultaneously, broadcast live across social media, news networks, and live streams. It was, in a sense, the modern parallel, not just a celestial event, but a global cultural moment. So when people asked what history could tell us about the 7 comets, the answer was paradoxical. History told us that comets always mattered, always shook societies, always carried symbolic weight. But history also told us that nothing like this had ever happened before. The parallels could only go so far, the rest would be written in real time by us as we lived through it. And perhaps that was the most fitting lesson of all. Comets have always been mirrors, reflecting our fears, hopes, and stories back at us. In 2025, with 7 of them burning across the sky, the mirror was bigger than ever before. What we saw in it would reveal less about the comets themselves and more about us. The announcement of 7 comets lining up for the year 2025 did not stay confined to astronomy journals or quiet observatories. It burst into the public consciousness like a wildfire, igniting conversations on every corner of the globe. From the instant the story hit mainstream headlines, people felt the pull of something larger than themselves. At first, the reaction was pure awe. Images of glowing tails streaking through early skies were shared millions of times, plastered across social media feeds, news channels, and digital billboards in major cities. Ordinary people who had never paid attention to astronomy before were suddenly craning their necks upward, asking questions and debating possibilities. For many, the very idea of 7 comets visible in a single year seemed too extraordinary to process. It was like learning that the stars themselves had decided to stage a spectacle. But public reaction rarely stays uniform, and the awe quickly fractured into different strands of emotion. On one hand, there was wonder, the same timeless fascination that has always followed celestial events. Families planned nighttime gatherings to watch together, schools rushed to set up telescopes for students, and tourism companies advertised comet viewing excursions in desert regions with clear skies. For millions of people, this lineup became a bucket list event, something they wanted to remember for the rest of their lives. Social media exploded with hashtags like 3IATLAS, Year of Comets, and 7 Signs, and amateur astronomers turned into celebrities overnight as their live streams pulled in millions of viewers eager for guided sky tours. Yet at the same time, fear began to seep into the conversation. Humans have a long history of associating comets with doom, and the sheer improbability of 7 appearing at once fueled anxious speculation. On forums, conspiracy theories multiplied. Some insisted that the event was being covered up, that scientists weren't telling the full story. "There's no way this is natural," one viral post claimed, suggesting that a hidden planetary body or even alien intervention was behind it. Others revived age-old prophecies, linking the 7 comets to the 7 trumpets of the Book of Revelation or to apocalyptic predictions found in Mayan or Nostradamus texts. Fear-mongering videos circulated on YouTube, amassing millions of views as self-proclaimed experts declared that the comets were harbingers of an impending collapse, whether natural, political, or spiritual. Governments and scientists scrambled to address the rising tide of fear. NASA and the European Space Agency held press conferences, calmly explaining orbital paths and assuring the public that none of the comets posed any threat of collision with Earth. Diagrams were shown, probabilities explained, and reassurances repeated. But for some, these official statements only deepened suspicion. The very fact that authorities were making such an effort to deny danger was, in the minds of skeptics, proof that something was being hidden. It was a classic paradox. The more scientists tried to reassure, the less some people believed. Religious groups added yet another dimension to the public reaction. Churches, mosques, temples, and spiritual leaders across the world interpreted the event in their own ways. Some saw the comets as signs of divine judgment, warnings to repent or prepare for great change. Sermons declared that the heavens were aligning to signal a new era, a reckoning, or the fulfillment of prophecy. Other leaders took a gentler view, framing the comets as reminders of creation's majesty, urging followers to find humility and wonder in the face of the cosmos. The divergence of interpretations revealed something profound. People don't just react to events, they filter them through belief systems, fears, and hopes that already exist within them. Meanwhile, the entertainment industry wasted no time capitalizing on the phenomenon. Streaming platforms rushed to produce documentaries, dramatizations, and speculative shows about the year of the comets. News outlets ran constant countdowns to key nights of visibility, treating each comet like the premiere of a blockbuster movie. Even musicians and artists joined in, releasing comet-inspired tracks, paintings, and performances. The public, hungry for content, consumed it all, blurring the line between scientific reality and cultural spectacle. The comets weren't just in the sky anymore. They had become symbols, stories, and memes woven into everyday conversation. But the public reaction wasn't all positive. For some, the sudden ubiquity of comet news created fatigue. Comet burnout became a joking phrase online, as people grew tired of endless hype, headlines, and doomsday chatter. Skeptics dismissed the frenzy as just another media storm, no different than any viral trend. And yet, even those who rolled their eyes couldn't entirely escape the impact. When the comets began to appear visibly, glowing like ethereal streaks above cities and countryside alike, cynicism gave way to silence. For at least a moment, even the most skeptical were forced to look up and admit it was stunning. In parts of the world with clear skies, the public response became almost festival-like. Cities organized community stargazing events with parks filling up at night as people brought blankets, telescopes, and snacks. In rural areas, families drove far into the countryside to escape light pollution and witness the spectacle in unspoiled darkness. Campgrounds reported record bookings, and tourism to places like Chile's Atacama Desert or the American Southwest surged. In many ways, the 7 comets brought people together, creating shared experiences that cut across political divides and social boundaries. Under the sky, the divisions of Earth seemed to blur. Yet alongside joy, fear remained stubborn. Some survivalist groups treated the event as confirmation of their apocalyptic beliefs, stocking up on supplies and preparing for collapse. Videos of bunker building, food hoarding, and comet-proof shelters circulated online, sparking both ridicule and concern. Psychologists warned of the risk of collective anxiety spiraling into harmful actions, citing past tragedies where cosmic events had inspired dangerous cult activity. Authorities monitored fringe groups closely, worried that the sheer scale of the comet lineup could push vulnerable people into extreme behaviors. The comets, though harmless themselves, were proving once again how powerful symbols can become in shaping human choices. Children, however, offered a refreshing counterpoint to fear. Schools around the world integrated the comets into their lessons, turning science classes into mini astronomy hubs. Teachers encouraged students to track orbits, sketch comets, or write creative stories about them. For many kids, this became the first time they looked up at the sky with curiosity, planting seeds of future passion for science. Parents shared photos of their children pointing at the heavens, wide-eyed and smiling, proving that even amid hysteria, the event could inspire pure wonder. Economically, the public reaction created ripple effects. Sales of telescopes skyrocketed, with manufacturers struggling to meet demand. Tourism in regions with ideal viewing conditions boomed. Bookstores reported spikes in purchases of astronomy guides and stargazing manuals. Even fashion brands jumped on the bandwagon, releasing comet-themed collections that sold out quickly. The cultural penetration of the event was so deep that even those indifferent to astronomy found themselves wearing shirts with comet designs or sipping cocktails with comet-themed names at trendy bars. What made the public reaction most fascinating, though, was how contradictory it was. Awe and fear, unity and division, skepticism and belief, all coexisted. For some, the comets were a reminder of humanity's smallness, humbling and unifying. For others, they were terrifying symbols of fragility, proof that disaster was around the corner. For still others, they were simply entertainment, another viral event to be consumed and forgotten. But no matter how people reacted, one fact was undeniable. The 7 comets had seized the world's attention. In an era when headlines shifted by the minute and attention spans were fractured, The night sky had somehow managed to dominate the global conversation, and in that, perhaps, was the greatest revelation. Public reaction wasn't just about comets, it was about us. About how we process the extraordinary, about how we crave meaning, about how we turn cosmic randomness into stories that shape culture, belief, and identity. The comets themselves were silent, drifting through their ancient orbits, indifferent to human eyes. But the way we responded revealed everything about our species, our fears, our hopes, our creativity, our divisions. The 7 comets had become a mirror, and in gazing upward, humanity was really gazing at itself. If the public's reaction to the 7 comets of 2025 was a mixture of awe, fear, and speculation, the reaction within the scientific community was something entirely different, a frenzy of activity that bordered on chaos. For astronomers, physicists, and space agencies across the world, this was not just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was an event so extraordinary that many considered it a once-in-civilization gift. From the moment the lineup was confirmed, observatories scrambled to adjust schedules, redirect resources, and coordinate with one another in ways rarely seen before. It was as though the entire scientific world had been handed a surprise exam with questions no one had ever prepared for, and the clock was already ticking. The first scramble was simply observational. Normally comets are studied one at a time. Astronomers can devote telescope time to capturing their movement, brightness, and composition without too much competition for resources. But 7 comets arriving almost at once created a bottleneck. Every major ground-based observatory in the world suddenly found itself overbooked. Telescopes in Hawaii, Chile, Spain, South Africa, and Australia shifted into overdrive, their operators drawing up new schedules to maximize coverage. Even amateur astronomers found themselves playing a vital role, since their smaller telescopes could capture data from angles and times that the larger oversubscribed observatories couldn't manage. The international astronomy community quickly realized that cooperation, not competition, would be the only way to handle this avalanche of celestial data. And it wasn't just ground-based facilities. Space-based observatories, from Hubble to the James Webb Space Telescope, were suddenly thrust into the spotlight. NASA and ESA teams debated how much telescope time to allocate to the comets, weighing the demands of existing projects against the sheer rarity of the lineup. Eventually, emergency schedules were drafted to ensure at least partial coverage of each comet at critical points in their orbits. Some scientists argued fiercely that Webb should focus on the interstellar comet, 3IATLAS, since its chemical signature could reveal secrets about star systems far beyond our own. Others countered that Comet A3, Tsuchinshan Atlas, expected to shine brightest, deserved priority, since it could provide unprecedented detail about the dynamics of massive cometary activity near the Sun. The arguments grew heated, but everyone agreed on one point. The data from this year would shape cometary science for decades, maybe centuries. Meanwhile, planetary defense officers, usually tasked with monitoring near-Earth asteroids, jumped into action. While none of the 7 comets posed a collision threat, their unusual clustering raised eyebrows. The possibility of fragmentation, always a concern with comets, became even more pressing when multiplied by 7. What if one broke apart unexpectedly and sent fragments on unpredictable paths? What if the gravitational interactions between comets subtly altered their trajectories? Teams ran supercomputer simulations around the clock, crunching orbital mechanics equations with such intensity that some joke the comets were melting servers before they even melted ice. The results were mostly reassuring, but the very need to run these scenarios reflected the atmosphere of scientific urgency. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the scramble, though, was the opportunity for comparative study. Usually, cometary science is limited by scarcity. One object here, another a few years later, each studied in isolation. In 2025, however, scientists could examine 7 comets simultaneously, each with unique characteristics. One was interstellar, carrying alien chemistry. Another was a short-period comet returning from the inner solar system. Still others were long-period wanderers from the Oort cloud, making their first visits in tens of thousands of years. Together they offered a laboratory unlike anything imaginable. For the first time, researchers could directly compare how different types of comets behaved under similar conditions, measuring differences in brightness, tail formation, and outgassing with unprecedented precision. It was like being handed a set of 7 rare gemstones and asked to examine them all side by side instead of one at a time. This comparative goldmine also highlighted a logistical nightmare: data overload. Every telescope, every satellite, every amateur astronomer with a decent camera was contributing images and measurements. The sheer volume of data pouring in threatened to overwhelm even the most advanced systems. Research institutions scrambled to expand storage capacity, set up new collaborative databases, and build AI tools capable of sorting through terabytes of comet imagery in real time. Machine learning algorithms were trained to identify subtle features in the comet's tails, to spot potential outbursts, or to flag early signs of fragmentation. In some ways, the scientific scramble wasn't just about observing comets. It was about pushing the boundaries of how science itself could be organized in the face of overwhelming information. The scramble extended beyond observation into exploration. Space agencies began debating whether to launch new missions to intercept one or more of the comets. Normally, planning a comet flyby takes years, sometimes decades, but the rarity of the lineup prompted discussions of emergency fast-track missions. Private companies even threw their hats into the ring, suggesting small, quickly assembled probes that could piggyback on existing rockets. While time constraints made most of these plans unrealistic, the very fact that they were considered showed how desperate scientists were not to miss the chance. Some proposals gained traction, including ideas to redirect existing spacecraft, like NASA's Lucy mission, already on its way to the Trojan asteroids, to perform opportunistic flybys if orbital alignments allowed. It was improvisation on a cosmic scale, the scientific equivalent of chasing a moving train. At the same time, the scientific scramble wasn't purely professional, it was deeply personal. For astronomers who had devoted their lives to studying comets, this was the culmination of everything they had dreamed of. Many stayed awake for days at a time, fueled by coffee and adrenaline, glued to computer screens as live feeds streamed in data. Graduate students who had been struggling to find topics for their dissertations suddenly found themselves with enough material to fill entire libraries. Young scientists entered the field at the perfect moment, their careers instantly shaped by an event that might never be repeated. And older scientists who had spent decades staring into the void, waiting for rare moments like this, described the lineup as the reward for a lifetime of patience. But the scramble also brought tension. Competition for telescope time was fierce, and not everyone got what they wanted. Emails leaked showing bitter disputes between research teams, accusing one another of hogging resources or exaggerating the importance of their comet. Social media revealed a glimpse of this academic drama, with passive-aggressive posts and cryptic complaints about favoritism in telescope allocations. Some worried that the flood of data would lead to chaos, with too many papers rushed out too quickly, overwhelming peer review systems and muddying the waters instead of clarifying them. It was a reminder that science, for all its ideals of objectivity, is still practiced by humans, and humans are not immune to rivalry, pride, or ambition. The scramble also intersected with politics. Funding agencies realized the lineup was a perfect opportunity to showcase their importance, and politicians latched onto the event as a chance to promote national pride. In some countries, state media framed their observatories' contributions as proof of scientific superiority. International collaborations became both inspiring and strained, as rival nations balanced the need to share data with the desire to claim credit. The 7 comets, drifting silently through space, had become unwilling participants in the theatre of geopolitics. Yet beneath all the noise, the rivalry, the logistics, the politics, there was an undercurrent of awe. Even the most hardened scientists, those who had spent decades treating comets as cold, dusty leftovers of the solar system, admitted to moments of wonder. In private journals and late-night conversations, they confessed to feeling something almost spiritual as they watched the data roll in. It wasn't just science. It was participation in a cosmic story far bigger than any individual or institution. And that sense of awe drove them harder, kept them awake longer, and reminded them why they had chosen this path in the first place. By the middle of 2025, as the lineup reached its peak, the scientific scramble had evolved into something like organized chaos. Data was flowing, discoveries were being made almost weekly, and new questions were surfacing faster than old ones could be answered. For some, it felt overwhelming. For others, exhilarating. But all agreed on one thing. The 7 comets had changed the game. The theories they challenged, the data they provided, and the sheer experience of observing them would ripple across science for decades. The scramble might have been frantic, but it was also historic. And when future generations looked back on the year of the comets, they would not only see the spectacle in the skies, but also the furious, passionate scramble on the ground as humanity tried to make sense of the impossible. Whenever an event of cosmic scale grips the world, science does not get to own the conversation alone. Alongside the meticulous work of astronomers and physicists, there's always another force rising in the background: speculation, rumours, and full-blown conspiracy theories. The 7 comet lineup of 2025 was no exception. In fact, it may have been the most fertile breeding ground for conspiracies in decades. The sheer improbability of 7 comets arriving together, combined with the eerie beauty of their presence in the sky, practically invited alternative explanations. And as humanity has proven time and time again, whenever reality feels too big, too strange, or too difficult to fully understand, people rush to fill the gaps with stories of their own making. One of the earliest and most widespread conspiracies revolved around the idea that the comets weren't natural at all. Some insisted they were alien megastructures disguised as icy space rocks. Social media accounts exploded with threads claiming that the synchronized timing of their arrivals was no coincidence, that it was, in fact, a deliberate signal. Theories varied. Some claimed the comets were observation devices sent by extraterrestrial civilizations to study Earth at a moment of global fragility. Others took it further, insisting that these were harbingers of invasion, slow-moving ships hidden in plain sight. Grainy photographs of the comets' tails were scrutinized for anomalies, with some claiming to see geometric patterns or blinking lights within the dust trails. Scientists dismissed such claims as optical illusions, but to those already convinced of a cover-up, denials only added fuel to the fire. Then came the apocalyptic crowd. Prophets of doom, long obsessed with celestial warnings, declared the 7 comets a fulfillment of ancient predictions. Some pointed to biblical passages about stars falling from the heavens, twisting the imagery to fit the spectacle in the skies. Others cited Nostradamus, claiming obscure quatrains had predicted a year when 7 flames would cross the sky and herald upheaval on Earth. Online forums filled with heated debates, with some convinced this was the beginning of the end times. Doomsday preppers began stockpiling supplies, convinced that hidden governments knew more than they were admitting. After all, they reasoned, how could such an unprecedented event not carry catastrophic consequences? Adding to the storm of speculation were rumours about secret government knowledge. Some conspiracy theorists latched onto leaked documents, often poorly sourced, sometimes outright fabricated, claiming that NASA, ESA, and other agencies had been tracking the comets for years but deliberately withheld the information to avoid panic. The very fact that official agencies appeared somewhat caught off guard by the lineup only deepened suspicions. To many, it seemed implausible that 7 comets could sneak up on humanity, even though, in reality, the unpredictable brightness and trajectory of comets often make them difficult to track until they approach the inner solar system. Still, the narrative of concealment and deception proved irresistible. The theories didn't stop there. Some speculated that the comets were not visitors but warnings. One popular thread suggested that the comets were the aftermath of a cosmic collision. A larger object shattered into 7 pieces and flung toward the inner solar system. If that was true, conspiracy forums argued, then what had caused the collision? Some suggested advanced alien warfare. Others pointed fingers at secret human weapons, hinting that experiments with nuclear or directed energy technologies had somehow destabilized the outer reaches of the solar system. These stories often ignored the vast distances and improbabilities involved, but accuracy was never the goal. Emotion and intrigue were. Meanwhile, the New Age community spun the 7 comets into a tapestry of mystical interpretations. Spiritual influencers proclaimed that the comets represented a cosmic alignment meant to usher humanity into a new era. Some described them as messengers of transformation, their appearance coinciding with a predicted shift in consciousness. Books and e-courses popped up overnight, promising to teach followers how to harness the energy of the 7 wanderers for personal growth or enlightenment. Online meditation sessions were scheduled to coincide with peak visibility, with participants claiming to feel waves of energy as the comets streaked across the sky. Whether skeptics dismissed it as pseudoscience or not, the idea spread like wildfire, offering hope and meaning in an event otherwise dominated by uncertainty. But not all conspiracies were rooted in hope or mysticism. Some veered into paranoia, suggesting that the comets were harbingers of biological threats. These theorists argued that comets, which carry water and organic molecules, might also harbour dormant pathogens. They speculated that as the comets shed dust and ice, Earth could be showered with alien microbes capable of triggering pandemics. The echoes of recent global health crises made such fears especially potent. Videos warning of space plagues racked up millions of views, mixing shaky science with cinematic imagery of viruses and leaving viewers with a lingering sense of unease. Scientists once again rushed to clarify that cometary material burning up in Earth's atmosphere posed no such threat, but clarifications rarely go viral. Conspiracies also latched onto timing. Why, people asked, did the comets arrive in 2025, a year already charged with political turmoil, environmental crises and social unrest? For some, the answer was obvious. It wasn't coincidence at all. They linked the celestial spectacle to earthly events, claiming the comets were omens tied to elections, wars, or climate disasters. A fringe but vocal group argued that powerful elites were using the comets as cover for secret projects, suggesting that while the world stared skyward, governments were conducting experiments, signing clandestine treaties, or preparing mass population controls. Outlandish as these ideas were, they tapped into the very real anxieties of a world already suspicious of institutions. Adding fuel to the speculative fire were moments of genuine mystery, when one of the comets unexpectedly brightened, producing an outburst of activity that made it briefly visible even in city skies. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was proof of tampering. They circulated before and after photos, suggesting the explosion was evidence of an impact or deliberate detonation. Scientists explained it as a common cometary phenomenon, volatile materials beneath the surface suddenly venting gas and dust. But for those already primed to distrust official narratives, the explanation sounded like a convenient excuse. The role of the media in all this was impossible to ignore. Mainstream outlets covered the comets with cautious excitement, often relying on expert commentary. But in the digital Wild West of social platforms, the tone was entirely different. Clickbait headlines declared the comets a cosmic mystery scientists can't explain. Viral videos promised, "The truth NASA won't tell you." Influencers with no background in astronomy amassed millions of views by spinning elaborate stories, blending real images with fictional narratives. And because sensationalism spread faster than sober analysis, these narratives often reached wider audiences than the actual science. Interestingly, even within the scientific community, there was quiet acknowledgement that some of the conspiracies weren't entirely baseless, at least in spirit. The idea that comets could carry organic materials wasn't pure fantasy. In fact, studies of past comets had revealed complex molecules, sparking serious debates about whether life's building blocks might have been delivered to Earth by such celestial wanderers. The possibility of fragmentation or unpredictable behavior wasn't fear-mongering. It was a documented risk, and the fact that multiple space agencies were competing, sometimes secretly, for data and prestige meant that suspicions of withheld information weren't completely far-fetched. Conspiracies thrive in the grey areas where truth and uncertainty overlap, and the 7 comets of 2025 provided more grey areas than anyone could count. What made the conspiracies particularly potent was their ability to tap into emotion. Awe, fear, hope, paranoia, all of it swirled together as humanity gazed upward. For some, the comets were proof of divine intervention. For others, evidence of alien contact. For still others, an omen of doom. Each interpretation told us less about the comets themselves and more about the people interpreting them. The skies became a mirror, reflecting back our deepest hopes and darkest fears, and in that reflection, humanity found stories too powerful to let go of, no matter how implausible. In the end, the conspiracies and speculations surrounding the 7 comets became part of their legacy. They weren't just icy visitors drifting through the void. They were catalysts for imagination, for wonder, for fear, and for stories that blurred the line between science and myth. Long after the comets faded into the darkness, the tales spun around them would remain, passed down in books, videos, and whispered conversations. Reminders that whenever the universe throws us a mystery too big to fully understand, we will always invent stories to make sense of it, even if those stories say more about us than about the stars. The appearance of the 7 comets was more than an astronomical event. It was a cultural moment that swept across borders, generations, and belief systems, transforming the skies into a shared stage for the entire planet. Unlike scientific conferences or closed-door space agency meetings, this spectacle unfolded in plain view for everyone. No one needed a telescope to notice it. Just a glance upward at night was enough to see streaks of glowing light cutting across the heavens, and that simple accessibility made the comets not only a scientific curiosity, but also a cultural phenomenon that reshaped conversations, traditions, and even personal identities. Humanity, for a brief period, seemed united by something beyond politics, beyond economics, beyond the divides that usually define us. One of the most immediate cultural impacts was the surge in public gatherings. From city rooftops to rural fields, people came together to watch the night sky. Entire parks filled with families, stargazers, and curious onlookers armed with blankets, binoculars, and smartphones. Communities organized viewing parties where music, food, and conversation blended with the spectacle overhead. In some places, religious groups led collective prayers under the glowing trails, interpreting the comets as divine signs. In others, local artists set up live performances, dancing or playing instruments, as though trying to match the rhythm of the celestial display. The act of looking up became more than just an observation. It was a ritual, one that momentarily softened the edges of isolation and reminded people of their place in something much larger. Cultural traditions quickly adapted, absorbing the comets into folklore. Storytellers from indigenous communities wove them into their oral histories, interpreting the 7 luminous bodies as ancestral spirits crossing the sky. In East Asia, some compared them to celestial dragons, symbols of transformation and change. Across Africa and South America, elders recalled older comet sightings and reinterpreted them in light of this extraordinary alignment, creating new layers of myth that blended past and present. Even in technologically advanced cities where folklore often feels like a relic of the past, urban legends emerged almost overnight. Children swapped playground stories about the comets, granting wishes, while social media platforms teemed with tales of people who claimed to experience strange coincidences under the glowing skies. The influence on art and creativity was immediate and profound. Musicians released albums inspired by the 7 comets, their tracks weaving together themes of mystery, awe, and cosmic destiny. Painters captured surreal images of glowing skies mirrored in oceans or streaking above human silhouettes, their works often blending realism with dreamlike abstraction. Filmmakers rushed to adapt the event into stories, some speculative, some metaphorical. Within months, streaming platforms were filled with short films, animations, and documentaries inspired by the comets. Fashion too took notice. Clothing brands launched cosmic collections, borrowing the icy blues, fiery oranges, and shimmering silvers of the comet tails as design motifs. The comets became a cultural aesthetic as much as a scientific marvel, shaping how people express themselves through style, music, and visual art. Religious institutions also responded in strikingly different ways. Some embraced the comets as symbols of renewal, encouraging followers to interpret them as signs of hope or divine guidance. Special sermons were held, emphasizing the wonder of creation and humanity's humility before the vastness of the universe. Other groups took a more ominous stance, framing the comets as warnings of judgment or transformation. Pilgrimages were organized to sacred sites where the comets were especially visible, blending old traditions with a new cosmic event. This religious engagement gave the spectacle deeper layers of meaning, ensuring that for many people the 7 comets were not just lights in the sky but messages, whether comforting or cautionary, about the path of humanity. The digital age amplified the cultural impact beyond anything possible in earlier centuries. Social media platforms exploded with comet-related content. Hashtags dedicated to the 7 flames trended globally for weeks, as people shared photos, videos, and personal reflections. Memes sprouted as quickly as scientific analyses, some humorous, others deeply emotional. Live streams attracted millions of viewers who couldn't see the comets clearly from their own locations, turning the event into a collective digital experience. Influencers seized the opportunity, some using the spectacle to promote spirituality, others selling merchandise or experiences tied to the cosmic theme. Even video games and virtual worlds incorporated comet-related events, allowing players to experience the phenomenon in simulated spaces, further blurring the line between reality and imagination. Governments, too, found themselves swept into the cultural wave. Leaders issued public statements marvelling at the rare alignment, often using it as a metaphor for unity, resilience, or renewal. Some nations declared special holidays or cultural festivals to mark the event, boosting national pride while also stimulating local economies through tourism. Cities that became popular comet viewing destinations saw surges in visitors, filling hotels, restaurants, and transportation systems with travellers chasing the best view. In an era often defined by division, the comets offered governments a chance to appeal to shared wonder, framing the event as a moment of global togetherness rather than geopolitical competition. Education became another domain deeply transformed by the comets. Schools, eager to capture the excitement, integrated lessons about astronomy, mythology, and cultural history into their curriculums. Teachers organised late-night viewing sessions with students, blending science with the emotional power of direct experience. Young people, many of whom had never paid much attention to space before, suddenly found themselves captivated. Enrollments in astronomy clubs spiked, science museums reported record attendance, and interest in STEM careers briefly surged as the next generation imagined themselves unravelling the mysteries of the universe. For countless children, the 7 comets became a formative memory, the moment when the sky stopped being abstract and became personal. But the cultural impact was not purely celebratory. Alongside wonder came anxiety, and alongside unity came division. For every group that saw the comets as hopeful signs, there were others who saw them as omens of disaster. Some communities grew tense, fearing the worst. Rumours of impending calamity influenced cultural behaviours in unsettling ways. In certain regions, people delayed weddings, investments, or major decisions, convinced that cosmic upheaval was imminent. Others flocked to psychics and fortune-tellers, seeking interpretations and guidance. This duality, hope on one side, dread on the other, highlighted just how deeply cultural responses can diverge, even when triggered by the same shared event. The commercial world, ever quick to capitalize on mass attention, launched an avalanche of comet-themed products. Jewelry shaped like comet tails, beverages named after the 7, and limited edition sneakers glowing in neon trails flooded the market. Tourism campaigns branded cities as gateways to the 7 flames, offering comet-themed festivals, fireworks, and cultural exhibitions. While some critics decried the commodification of a natural wonder, others argued that commercialization kept the phenomenon alive in public consciousness long after the comets faded from the sky. In the marketplace, as in culture, the 7 comets proved too powerful an image to resist. The most striking cultural impact, however, was psychological. For many, the sight of 7 glowing comets streaking across the heavens was a profound reminder of perspective. In a world consumed by daily struggles, political conflicts, and economic uncertainty, the comets offered something rare, a moment of scale. Looking up, people realized how small their problems were compared to the grandeur of the universe. That recognition sparked not only humility, but also creativity, kindness, and dialogue. People wrote journals, recorded songs, painted canvases, and above all, talked to one another about what they felt. The comets opened emotional doorways, making space for awe in lives that had long been starved of it. In retrospect, the cultural impact of the 7 comets was as transformative as their scientific significance. They weren't just icy bodies streaking through the void. They became cultural mirrors reflecting humanity back to itself. In their glow, people saw their fears, hopes, ambitions, and contradictions. They inspired unity and division. Art and commerce, mysticism and skepticism, dread and joy. And perhaps most importantly, they reminded humanity that even in an age of technology and data, we are still deeply moved by the simple, primal act of looking up at the sky and wondering what it means. The 7 comets were temporary in the heavens, but in culture, they became immortal, etched into the stories, traditions, and memories of a generation that will never forget the year the sky lit up with fire and ice. Whenever a phenomenon as extraordinary as 7 comets streaking across the heavens occurs, the effects are never confined to science, art, or culture alone. Politics, always quick to seize upon the symbolic, the spectacular, and the uncertain, was inevitably reshaped by the event. Governments, institutions, and alliances across the globe were forced to respond, not only because their citizens demanded answers, but also because the very spectacle invited political manoeuvring, symbolism, and speculation. The 7 comets of 2025 were not just astronomical wanderers. They became political actors in their own right, pressing leaders to react, inspiring diplomatic posturing, and influencing global narratives in ways no one could have predicted. One of the first political consequences was the surge in public pressure on governments to provide clear explanations. Ordinary citizens, awestruck yet anxious, wanted reassurance that the comets posed no threat. In democracies, this translated into direct pressure on leaders through media and public forums. Politicians scrambled to be seen addressing the phenomenon, often staging televised press conferences with scientists at their side. In autocratic regimes, where open questioning of leaders is often discouraged, the pressure manifested differently. Rumours spread rapidly online, forcing authorities to release carefully crafted statements to prevent panic. Yet in both cases, the comets tested political systems, exposing how well or how poorly leaders could communicate in moments of global wonder tinged with fear. Internationally, the comets became an unexpected stage for soft power. Spacefaring nations like the United States, Russia, China, and members of the European Space Agency raced to present themselves as the authorities on the event. Each framed their space programs as indispensable to understanding the comets, using the moment to justify budgets, inspire nationalism, and showcase technological strength. The United States launched a rapid series of public briefings through NASA, emphasizing its leadership in space exploration. China streamed high-profile comet tracking missions live, highlighting its growing dominance in astronomy and space science. Russia, eager to reclaim lost prestige, emphasized its long legacy of comet research, framing the spectacle as proof of its enduring relevance. These maneuvers turned a scientific event into geopolitical theatre, with each nation vying to control the narrative and project superiority. The competition was not purely symbolic. Behind the scenes, intelligence agencies and defense departments treated the comets with suspicion, asking questions far removed from the wonder of the public. Could the comets alter communication systems? Could fragments enter Earth's atmosphere and cause damage? Were there strategic advantages to be gained from tracking, analysing, or even attempting to intercept cometary material? These questions, while speculative, spurred quiet international discussions. Space treaties that had lain dormant for decades were suddenly dusted off and debated, as policymakers considered what would happen if one nation attempted to claim data or resources from the comets before others. In a world already rife with geopolitical tensions, the 7 comets were another arena where mistrust simmered just below the surface. At the same time, the comets offered opportunities for cooperation. Some nations recognized that global collaboration would ease public fears and strengthen alliances. Joint scientific initiatives sprang up, with multinational teams sharing data and coordinating telescopes to maximize coverage. These collaborations were celebrated as symbols of unity in a fractured world. Proof that humanity could still come together when confronted with the vast unknown. Yet even within these projects, subtle rivalries lingered. Each nation wanted credit, each wanted its scientists quoted in the headlines, and each saw the comets as both a shared opportunity and a national asset. Cooperation was genuine, but it was also carefully calculated. Domestic politics were also deeply affected. Leaders facing criticism over unrelated issues suddenly found a chance to pivot. By associating themselves with the spectacle, they shifted public discourse away from scandals or crises. Speeches framed the comets as symbols of resilience, destiny, or divine favour, often tailored to local political needs. In some countries, populist leaders used the comets to stoke nationalism, arguing that their nation was chosen or blessed to witness such a rare alignment. In others, opposition parties accused governments of hiding the truth, framing the event as evidence of incompetence or corruption. Far from being a neutral event, the comets became a political football, kicked back and forth by competing narratives, each seeking to turn awe into advantage. The global economy too was touched by the political response. Stock markets wavered in the days following the comet's peak visibility, partly due to uncertainty about potential risks, and partly because of speculative fear-mongering amplified online. Politicians and central banks rushed to stabilize public sentiment, issuing reassurances that the comets posed no threat to infrastructure or markets. Yet opportunists thrived in the chaos, from companies selling comet insurance to politicians lobbying for increased space defense budgets. The comets were translated into dollars, votes, and power plays with astonishing speed, revealing just how quickly human systems absorb even cosmic wonders into their frameworks of control and competition. Religious and ideological movements intersected with politics in fascinating ways. Leaders in some countries leaned heavily on religious interpretations, using the comets to bolster their positions among devout populations. In secular states, this prompted backlash, with critics arguing that leaders were exploiting superstition to maintain authority. Meanwhile, activist groups seized the comets as metaphors for their causes. Environmentalists linked them to warnings about climate change, arguing that the fragility of the Earth under the cosmic sky underscored the need for urgent action. Social justice groups tied the shared experience of watching the comets to calls for global solidarity, framing it as proof that humanity's divisions were artificial when compared to the grandeur of the universe. In every corner, the comets became symbols for arguments far removed from their icy orbits, pulled into the gravitational fields of politics and ideology. Interestingly, the comets also exposed the vulnerabilities of governments in managing information. As conspiracies and speculations spread like wildfire online, official institutions struggled to counter them effectively. Attempts to debunk outlandish claims were often dismissed as cover-ups, while silence only deepened suspicion. This failure highlighted a growing political reality. In the digital age, authority is fragile, and cosmic events can destabilize trust in ways that no politician fully controls. For some governments, the comets became a stress test, revealing cracks in their ability to manage public perception. For others, they were an opportunity to experiment with new strategies of transparency, engaging directly with citizens through live streams, Q&A sessions, and interactive tools. The comets did not just shape politics, they reshaped how politics was performed in the 21st century. On the international stage, alliances and rivalries subtly shifted. Countries with advanced telescopes, observatories, or space missions found themselves courted by others eager for data, creating new networks of influence. Space agencies became diplomatic tools, their collaborations serving as quiet negotiations in broader political disputes. Even the United Nations convened special sessions to discuss the comets, not because they posed a direct threat, but because their symbolism was too powerful to ignore. The sight of 7 glowing visitors in the sky became a metaphor for humanity's place in the cosmos, and politicians were quick to insert themselves into that metaphor, framing it as an opportunity for unity, or as a warning about division. Ultimately, the political implications of the 7 comets revealed as much about humanity as about the cosmos. Where ordinary citizens saw beauty, leaders saw leverage. Where scientists saw data, politicians saw narratives. And where the comets themselves drifted silently, untouched by human concerns, Earth's governments transformed them into instruments of power, symbols of unity and division, excuses for spending and platforms for speeches. The comets may have been impartial travellers, but their reflection in human politics was anything but impartial. They exposed our rivalries, our insecurities, our ambitions, and our endless tendency to turn even the mysteries of the universe into stages for performance. In the end, the comets left the skies, fading into the darkness beyond human sight. But their imprint on politics lingered long after. Leaders had staked their reputations on them, nations had jockeyed for prestige around them, and movements had tied their causes to their glow. The 7 comets did not rewrite constitutions or topple governments, but they revealed the malleability of politics in the face of wonder. They showed that awe could be weaponized, that beauty could be politicized, and that even the cold silence of space could ignite heated debates in the chambers of power. For as long as humans govern humans, the sky will never be free of politics, and the 7 comets of 2025 will be remembered not only as celestial wanderers, but as catalysts of a political drama that stretched across the entire planet. The 7 comets of 2025 may have burned brightly across the skies for only a brief period, but their scientific legacy endured long after their tails faded into the depths of space. For astronomers, planetary scientists and space agencies around the globe, the event was nothing short of a treasure trove, a cosmic laboratory suddenly delivered to Earth's doorstep. Rarely does science get the gift of not 1, but 7 celestial visitors arriving in close proximity, allowing for comparative studies, unexpected discoveries, and fresh theories that challenged long-held assumptions. What began as a spectacle of light and ice ultimately reshaped our understanding of comets, planetary systems, and humanity's own fragile place in the solar neighbourhood. The most immediate scientific lesson was how unprepared humanity truly was for such an event. Despite decades of space observation technology, no one had anticipated this alignment. The realization that 7 comets could enter the inner solar system almost simultaneously without forewarning was a humbling wake-up call. Astronomers knew comets were unpredictable, but this was a striking demonstration of just how incomplete our observational coverage remained. Gaps in tracking systems, blind spots in telescope networks, and the sheer scale of the sky all combined to allow these icy bodies to slip in almost unnoticed until they were already dazzling the night skies. The first legacy, therefore, was a renewed commitment to sky surveys and planetary defense. Budgets for asteroid and comet detection programs soared, new space-based telescopes were fast-tracked, and governments began collaborating on a more comprehensive system to monitor the heavens. In a sense, the 7 comets exposed humanity's vulnerability, but they also spurred progress in fixing it. Beyond preparedness, the scientific community found itself with an unprecedented opportunity to study cometary diversity. Each of the 7 bodies, while similar in origin, revealed unique characteristics. Some were rich in dust, producing long, shimmering tails that glowed in the night sky. Others were more volatile, erupting unpredictably as pockets of gas burst through their icy shells. A few showed unusual chemical compositions, hinting at origins in different regions of the solar system or even beyond. By observing all 7 together, scientists could compare them in ways previously impossible. The discoveries confirmed what many had long suspected. Comets were not uniform relics of the early solar system, but wildly varied time capsules, each carrying a distinct record of cosmic history. One of the most profound findings came from spectroscopic studies. Using powerful ground-based and space telescopes, researchers detected complex organic molecules within the comet's tails, more complex than had ever been confirmed before. These findings reignited debates about panspermia, the theory that life on Earth might have been seeded by cometary or meteoritic material. The idea was not new, but the 7 comets provided fresh fuel, showing that the building blocks of life are not just present, but abundant in the icy wanderers of the cosmos. Suddenly, the possibility that Earth's origins were interstellar in scope felt less like speculation and more like a tantalizing clue. The comets, in their brief visit, reminded humanity that the story of life may be written not only on this planet, but in the frozen archives drifting between stars. Another striking lesson came from the comet's unpredictable behavior. Several of the 7 displayed sudden outbursts, brightening unexpectedly as subsurface gases vented into space. One even fragmented, splitting into multiple pieces that created a mini-swarm of glowing bodies. These events underscored how volatile and unstable comets can be, and how little control humanity has over their behavior. For planetary defense experts, this was a sobering reminder. While comets are rare threats compared to asteroids, their unpredictable nature makes them difficult to monitor and nearly impossible to deflect if they were on a collision course. The scientific legacy here was not only knowledge but urgency, an acknowledgement that future planetary defense strategies must account for comets as well as asteroids. No matter how improbable an impact might seem, the event also pushed the boundaries of technology. Telescopes and instruments were pushed to their limits, capturing data across wavelengths from visible light to radio emissions. Drones and balloons were even launched into the upper atmosphere to capture comet dust as it burned up, providing real-world samples without the need for costly space missions. These innovations, born out of necessity, laid the groundwork for future observational strategies. In many ways, the 7 comets accelerated technological development, forcing scientists to improvise, adapt, and innovate in real time. What might have taken years of planning and funding was achieved in mere months, driven by the urgency of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Perhaps one of the most unexpected scientific legacies was interdisciplinary collaboration. Comet research had traditionally been the domain of astronomers and planetary scientists, but the sheer scope of the event pulled in experts from other fields. Biologists studied organic molecules, chemists analysed dust particles, climatologists monitored potential atmospheric effects, and even sociologists tracked public reactions to scientific communication. The 7 comets blurred disciplinary boundaries, creating networks of collaboration that continued long after the celestial visitors had gone. This interdisciplinary spirit became a model for how science could respond to other global phenomena, from pandemics to climate change, proving that when knowledge is shared across fields, breakthroughs multiply. The educational legacy was equally profound. Students across the world were inspired by the comets, their imaginations captured by the glowing streaks overhead and the excitement rippling through classrooms and media. Schools, universities, and museums reported record levels of interest in astronomy programs, with a new generation declaring their intent to become scientists. The 7 comets, in essence, created a recruitment wave for the sciences, one that policymakers and educators quickly recognized as an opportunity. Scholarships, outreach programs, and space-related initiatives expanded, all justified as part of the long shadow cast by the cometary spectacle. For countless young people, the comets were their first taste of cosmic wonder, the spark that would ignite lifelong pursuits of knowledge. On a deeper level, the scientific legacy of the comets was philosophical. They reminded humanity that even in an age of advanced technology, we remain small participants in a vast and unpredictable cosmos. Our instruments can chart the heavens, but surprises still slip through. Our equations can model celestial mechanics, but chaos and volatility still defy certainty. The 7 comets were humbling teachers, showing that science is not about conquering the unknown, but about dancing with it, accepting its mysteries, probing its depths, and being willing to admit when we do not yet understand. This humility, paradoxically, is what makes science powerful. It thrives not on certainty, but on the pursuit of truth in the face of awe. Finally, the most enduring lesson was that science is inseparable from human society. The comets were not studied in isolation. They were studied amid the noise of conspiracy theories, political speeches, cultural responses, and personal fears. Scientists found themselves not only gathering data, but also communicating constantly with the public, correcting misconceptions, and striving to keep trust alive. In doing so, they learned that science is not simply about data and discovery. It is also about storytelling, about guiding humanity through wonder and worry alike. This lesson, more than any dataset, may prove to be the comet's greatest gift. For the legacy of the 7 comets was not just new knowledge about icy wanderers, but a new understanding of how science and society must walk together when confronted with the unknown. In the end, the 7 comets drifted back into the void, silent and cold, their glowing tails fading from human sight. But what they left behind was anything but silent. They left instruments refined, theories reshaped, collaborations forged, and generations inspired. They left humility and curiosity intertwined, a reminder that the universe is vaster and stranger than we can imagine, and that this strangeness is not a threat, but an invitation. The 7 comets of 2025 may have been fleeting visitors, but their legacy etched itself permanently into the chronicles of science. They were teachers, messengers, and mirrors, and in their icy brilliance, humanity found not only knowledge but perspective. Long after the sky returned to darkness, the lessons endured, proving that sometimes the most profound discoveries are not about what comets bring to Earth, but about what they reveal within us. When the last of the 7 comets finally faded from view, the night skies seemed strangely empty, as if the heavens themselves had dimmed after gifting humanity a glimpse of something extraordinary. Yet their departure did not mark an end so much as a beginning. For weeks, months, even years afterward, conversations about the comets continued to ripple through every corner of human life. They were not merely icy fragments drifting across the cosmos. They had become symbols, lessons, and catalysts for change. The comets left no scars on Earth's surface, but they carved deep impressions into the collective imagination of a species still learning how to navigate both its place in the universe and its responsibilities on the ground below. Their greatest legacy was the reminder of perspective. In an age of endless distractions, bitter divisions, and ceaseless noise, the comets demanded that humanity look up, beyond itself, towards something larger and more enduring. For a rare moment, people across the globe shared the same experience, whether on crowded city rooftops or in quiet rural fields. That act of looking upward, of marvelling together at 7 luminous visitors, made divisions seem smaller and problems feel fleeting. The comets reminded humanity that while borders may divide and ideologies may clash, the sky belongs to everyone. That realization did not erase conflict or inequality, but it planted a seed of awareness that the things uniting us are far older, vaster, and more enduring than the things dividing us. For science, the comets were both a gift and a challenge. They provided rare data, sparked innovation, and reawakened a hunger for exploration. Yet they also highlighted how much remains unknown, how even with satellites and telescopes scanning the skies, the universe can still surprise us. This duality, discovery and humility, formed the core of the comet's scientific lesson. Humanity is capable of extraordinary insight, but it must never mistake knowledge for mastery. The universe is not a puzzle to be conquered, but a mystery to be engaged with, a story far larger than any single generation can tell. The comets were humbling reminders that our instruments can measure, our minds can analyze, but our imagination and curiosity remain our greatest tools for survival and growth. Culturally, the comets revealed the power of wonder to reshape societies. They inspired art, music, literature, and folklore, embedding themselves into traditions and imaginations. They gave communities reasons to gather, reasons to celebrate, and reasons to reflect. They showed that beauty, when shared, can soften cynicism and inspire connection. At the same time, the anxieties and conspiracies they provoked revealed another truth, that awe and fear are never far apart. How humanity responds to cosmic mysteries often says less about the heavens and more about itself. The comets were mirrors, reflecting both the brilliance of creativity and the fragility of trust. In that reflection lay an invitation to nurture wonder without letting it collapse into paranoia, to embrace mystery without surrendering to fear. Politically, the comets became a stage on which nations played out both rivalry and cooperation. They revealed the hunger of governments to harness celestial events for power, prestige, and influence, but they also showed that cooperation is possible when the stakes are high enough. In their glow, diplomacy found new language, science found new funding, and citizens found new metaphors for unity. The comets demonstrated that politics, for all its flaws, is still shaped by the stories people tell, and few stories are more powerful than the sight of the heavens themselves bending to spectacle. But perhaps the most profound lesson was personal. For millions of individuals, the comets became a marker in their lives, a memory etched forever into their consciousness. People remembered where they stood, who they were with, what they felt as they looked up at streaks of light blazing across the darkness. Those moments became anchors of meaning, reminders that life is more than routines and struggles. In the glow of the comets, people found moments of stillness, awe, and clarity. And long after the comets vanished, those memories remained, shaping how people thought about themselves, their place in the world, and their connection to something larger. In the end, the 7 comets were fleeting. They passed through the solar system and returned to their lonely journeys, indifferent to the meanings humanity assigned them. Yet that indifference was itself part of their power. They did not come to teach, to warn, or to guide. They simply came, and in their coming, they invited humanity to teach, warn, and guide itself. Their silence forced us to fill the void with our own voices, our own stories, our own sense of significance. And in doing so, they proved that sometimes the greatest teachers are not those who speak, but those who inspire us to find our own answers. The skies are dark again now, but the memory remains. The 7 comets of 2025 were more than celestial visitors. They were catalysts of wonder, mirrors of fear, sparks of creativity, and reminders of humility. They left behind no craters, but they left behind something far more enduring, a shared human story of awe. And in a world so often fractured, perhaps that story is the greatest gift of all.